Hi everyone, welcome to John's Briefs. Here again with Tim Forshey from Forshey Law. I'm just gonna, today is me getting out a little bit of frustration and sicking the lawyer on you people.
Oh boy.
And that, not quite, you understand, but I get this on the big channel, not irregularly. Well, if I'm on the jury, he walks.
Oh boy.
And that could be, there's a number of controversial shootings on the channel, or there was a stabbing from Apple River, Wisconsin. That guy was convicted and sent to prison. Well, if I was on the jury, he walks. I don't think those people understand how a jury works and how jury selection works and what the job of a juror is, quite frankly. I've stood in front of a jury as an expert. He has many times as a criminal defense attorney, a prosecutor, a judge pro tem. And obviously not standing before them, a judge pro tem, standing behind them, I guess, as the judge. So I want to talk to him about that sentiment of, if I'm on the jury, he walks.
To win the fight after the fight, you need help. After a use of force, I trust Firearms Legal Protection to help me win the fight for the rest of my life. From their 24/7 attorney-answered hotline to coverage for the use of all legal tools, Firearms Legal Protection has you covered. Get a discount by signing up at the link below.
So the thing I see, Tim, is that I think a lot of people that talk real big about how the jury system works probably have never actually been on one.
And probably never even been in the room when there was one.
That's so true.
They watched LA Law a few episodes, and that's where they're getting it from. Yeah, so Law and Order.
Law and Order,
Right.
so much Law and Order expertise.
Bum, bum. Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, because every time I've actually looked in the eyes of a jury, I see 14 people, it's usually not 12, by the way, because you got alternates, 14 people who are taking this job very seriously, and you know, sometimes are taking notes, are asking questions. You know, in some jurisdictions they let jurors write down questions on a piece of paper and give them to the judge.
And we do in Arizona.
Yeah, and those are great. And some jurors ask really interesting questions.
Often ones that can't possibly be answered, but that's a whole other situation. Yeah.
Once again, right? So I always say a jury is like a 600-year-old dragon with an IQ of 1200, and you don't know what that dragon is interested in, but you do know you're crunchy and you taste good with ketchup. And so be careful around the dragon, right? Yeah. And so when somebody's like, here's the big thing that I want to ask you to kind of talk about.
Okay.
Is that in the jury selection process, when we talk about, this is called voir dire, because, you know, when you want to say, instead of saying jury selection, you know, you say it in Latin so that you sound cooler, right? That you're looking for people that you think already have a preconceived idea of how this is supposed to be. And you're like, not that guy. Now, I guess if you're in a criminal defense and you're the defense attorney for this guy that you're like, well, I don't know how we're going to do. You want that person on your jury that's like, you know, I believe in the right to keep and bear arms. Yeah. But you know the other side's going to be like, no, I'm going to catch that guy and you're never going to make it to a jury.
Yeah. So basically, jury selection is all about weeding out bias, right? And as Young's properly pointed out, if I can determine that a potential juror, and by the way, just so we'll preface this, so that if no Arizona attorneys out there think I'm an incompetent boob, we no longer have voir dire in our state of Arizona.
It's weird, right?
Went away a year ago, and it's still the weirdest thing. It's still the weirdest thing. So now, what that means is, folks, is that you can still, some judges will allow the lawyers to ask a few questions. Generally speaking, the judge is going to ask the questions. Now, the lawyers don't even get to ask questions. And there's no such thing as what's called a peremptory strike. We used to have, depending on the type of trial, anywhere between 4 and 8 peremptory strikes on each side, which means I can strike this person for any reason that I want to, except race. If they're the same race as the defendant, then there's very, very serious scrutiny that's given to that peremptory strike under federal law. There's a law of Kentucky that made that a law about 20 years ago. So short of that, I could strike somebody because they were funny looking. I could strike them because I didn't like their accent or I didn't like the shoes they wore. I didn't have to give any kind of a reason to the judge. We're going to excuse juror number 12, and they would be excused. So that was the way it used to work. So if I determined that juror 12 had a bias in favor of the state, I would strike them. If the state determined that juror 11 had a bias in favor of the defendant, they would strike them. In other words, the short way of putting this is, if I like a juror, or if the state likes a juror, they're going to be gone. And so the jurors that are left over, that's the way it just is. And the people that are left over are literally the people that neither lawyer liked. Right? And that's really what it boils down to. And that's kind of hard for people to believe, that your entire freedom and your entire treasure is going to be determined literally by people that neither attorney really liked. And that's who you're left with. And so it's a dragon that's been screened through that way. So, yeah.
Well, and that's still the way it is everywhere but Arizona.
Well, yeah, it's some sort of a model project, and I'm voting against it. I mean, I feel like I don't have control of part of the trial that's really important if I can't do voir dire.
Yeah.
There are people that say it is nothing more than rolling the dice, and it doesn't matter how experienced the lawyers are, they're still going to wind up with a crapshoot. I get that perspective. I disagree with it, but I get that. It's funny, I can always, when I'm teaching this in my CCW classes, especially if I've got a large class, 30, 40 people, I do it late in the class, and there's usually somebody that I just have a feel for, and I'll say, how sure would you have to be of my client's guilt to send him to prison for 30 years? And without hesitating, they say 100%. And I'm like, well, that's the lawyer. And I spotted that this person, and I would say my batting average on that's like 850. I mean, it's just, I just get a feel for when somebody is jiving, right? And that's the person I want on my jury. And
Sure.
if I get that feeling, and it's a strong feeling, I'm not going to ask the question and give my opponent the chance to strike him. I'm just going to take a gamble that I've read this person correctly and I want him on my jury. Right. And that gamble pays off most of the time if you've been doing this for a while and you can read people, right? But in Arizona, we no longer get that opportunity. So now the good news is that they've expanded tremendously. Judges are being very helpful with regard to allowing us to strike people for cause. Things that the judges used to say, no, I don't find that there's cause, I want to go ahead and keep them on the jury pool. Now the judges are a lot more sensitive to that, and they're letting us strike people for cause more often. But still, yeah, this lack of voir dire is not something that most trial lawyers, I think, are fond of. I haven't met one yet that likes it.
Yeah,
so,
and we'll see how the
how it turns out.
experiment goes.
Right. But as far as what John said, if somebody says, by God, if I'd have been there, he'd have walked, that means you're going into the trial with bias. Right? And that's something I don't want. Even as a defense attorney who wants to do well for my client, the system is important. And I started crying one time many years ago. I'm not weeping, not sobbing in court, but I got a teary-eyed feeling when a judge started explaining how important jury trials are. And the judge pointed out that really the only two times that American citizens display their citizenship really is when you vote and when you serve on a jury. Mm-hmm. And you should take both of those quite seriously, right? And if I'm on trial, I don't want a bunch of flippant people that go in with preconceived notions that have already got their mind made up, judging my guilt or innocence. That's just not, the system falls apart if that's the case. So to me, getting selected for jury duty, although it can be a pain in the butt, we have laws in place so you're not going to lose your job. If the trial's going to last more than 4 days, you get compensated by your employer. I mean, it's one of those things where look at it as an adventure. I mean, this is free drama. It's like, and some of the most dramatic moments I've ever experienced in my life, I don't care if Steven Spielberg directed the movie, happen in court. I mean, some real, like, when they say please rise and the jury reads that verdict, you can slice the tension with a knife. I mean, everybody in that courtroom, you can hear a pin drop 10 miles away. It's amazing, the drama in that room. It is. And so enjoy that. It's going to be a fantastic story at dinner. Later on, how this trial went. And this person said this, and this is what we decided, and you should have been in that jury room. And this other guy, blah, blah, blah. It was like 12 angry men. Take it seriously. Don't go in with a preconceived notion either way. I have a very dear relative who says, if I'm selected for jury duty, whoever that person is at the defense counsel or at the defense desk is guilty. I don't care. I mean, they wouldn't be there if the state didn't think they're guilty, and if the state didn't think they're guilty, they wouldn't be there. So if you're wearing an orange jumpsuit, you're guilty as far as I'm concerned.
Wow.
And that's just as scary the opposite direction.
That's a terribly scary thing.
And we get these biases where it's just like, holy cow. And again, it's corny, but watch the original version of 12 Angry Men with Henry Fonda, and tell me you're not moved by that. That's the way the system is supposed to work.
Well, and remember, so the jury's job is to stand between an accused defender and the state.
That's exactly right.
The jury's job is to...
And if they do it right, that's what could be more important than that?
It's super important, right? The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what they accuse the defendant of doing, the defendant has done, and that is illegal. So the jury's job is to be the impartial witness. Right. The one who says, tell me all the evidence. And
the jury is known as the finder of fact.
Yeah.
So, I'm throwing facts out there, and the state's throwing facts out there, and the judge may say, no, you can't talk about that, or you can't talk about that. That won't be in front of the jury. But the jury hears all these facts, and then they have to decide what are the facts, right? They're hearing my version of the facts and the state's version of the facts, and they're black and white, and the jury's going to decide, is it black or is it white? So the finder of fact, the actual determiner of what the facts are in a case, are the jury and only the jury, not the lawyers, not the defendant, not the judge. It is the jury. That door closes. There's no cameras in there. There's no recording devices in there. It is sacrosanct, and they have a conversation. And that can be 10 minutes, or it can be 10 days, or 10 weeks. So.
Yeah, and they've got to come to an agreement on what is going on there, so they have to be of one mind at the end of things. And if they can't, if they can't come to one mind, well, we try again with a new jury, and we have that problem. So here's my other big challenge is they say, okay, I've seen the video and that is definitive. Now I've testified in enough cases that video evidence is compelling evidence.
It is, and now juries expect it. You know, in the land of CSI, now they want to see all the ballistics and let me see the graphics on the screen and blah blah blah. So,
and video is important, and
it is.
This is literally my job. I do video analysis for a living,
and nobody does it better, and that's why it's so important. Yeah,
but it's not the entirety of the facts.
Right.
There are other things. I just had a case, we talked about it this morning off camera, that we saw a use of deadly force on camera, and I said, I can't tell you if that's justified or not by that video. I have to hear more facts about this in order to know why what happened.
If all you see is somebody shoot somebody and you don't know the backstory, it's kind of hard to say, well, that doesn't look justified, but I guess I need to know the whole story. I mean, maybe the guy just said that, I don't know, my daughter's, you can't see off screen that his accomplice is holding your daughter with a knife to her throat. I don't know what's going on, so yeah.
Or, he's got his hand in his pocket with a button on it with a bomb in his car or something, there's all these things.
Sure.
So when somebody goes, I have definitive knowledge here, well, that tells me, A, you're just an internet commenter. Be better, everybody.
Right.
B, you got to understand the place of the jury, and when you go in there with this idea of, I already know, and I have this bias, and I'm loud and proud about it, you ain't going to be on the jury.
Well, but the scary part is that there's people that have a bias, that have I would actually call it an agenda, and they hide that. They get on, they sit there during voir dire and they say, no, I don't know anybody that's a law enforcement officer, and no, I don't, and they just lie their butt off. And they go, and suddenly they're vanilla enough that they're on the jury, but in reality, they get into the jury room at the conclusion of trial. This son of a bitch is guilty, or this guy completely. In other words, they have an agenda, but they mask that agenda, and they sort of mold their way on the jury, and that happens.
And if you are that kind of a person that you think that lying and manipulating is the correct way, under oath, then you are an immoral scumbag
and a felon.
And get off my jury.
Exactly.
Quite frankly, it's not different than somebody says, "Oh, I don't want to open this huge can of worms," but you hear people go, "This is why juries need to be instructed in jury nullification." And I go, in the state of Arizona, if you mention those words, you cause a mistrial. In the deliberation,
the jury can do that, but they better shut up about it.
Right.
Yeah.
The jury does stand in judgment over the law in addition to the defendant. However, you better shut the heck up about it. So when you go, oh, wait a minute, they need to be informed of jury nullification by the judge. Dude, you just caused a mistrial.
Right.
And now you might say, in the jury room of deliberations to say, we don't have to enforce an unjust law.
Right.
We just
the
don't.
jury can say, look, this meets all the requirements from the jury instructions that we're supposed to convict this guy, but I just don't feel right about it. I think I might have done the same thing under these circumstances, and I think this is one of those where the law is not fair. And as long as they shut up about that and they all reach the same conclusion, that can certainly happen, and does. I think it's less frequent than Hollywood would have us believe.
Oh, very much
but
less.
But it does happen. And you're absolutely correct, John. If they just shut up about it, nobody's going to know what was said in that jury deliberation room. So, I've gone in and cleaned out jury deliberation rooms when I was a judge.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody leaves, and I go in there and tidy it up and stuff. There's no notes. And if there was, I would throw it in the trash can and not read it. It's sacrosanct. It really is. It's the definition of inner sanctum.
So to those who are so sure, if I'm on the jury, this happens. First of all, chill. Second of all, stop.
Yeah.
And third, I would say I haven't been called for a jury pool since 2007. It's been forever since I've been called for a jury pool. But I don't. I want those. Like, hey, if I get called for jury duty, I'm like, hey, guess what? In Phoenix, in Arizona, you get basically a day. As you go sit for a day. If you get called for a jury pool for a trial that lasts longer than that, well, then you're on that jury. If not, well, then you've done your day. Have a nice day.
Yeah, but different judges do it differently. So my favorite story. Last time I was seated, it was probably 10 years ago, and I was one. So the way this works, folks, is that they might call. Let's say the trial is expected to take 2 weeks. So there's going to have a lot of people that already have travel plans, or they have a surgery plan, or they have a critical job. They're a neurosurgeon. They've got 5 operations scheduled, and they're going to get dismissed. So when they know that the trial is going to last longer, they ask for a larger jury pool to be selected from. So I was the first 12 people to be seated in the box out of like 100 people. So the trial is expected to go like 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I'm a solo practitioner with employees, so I was like, that's not going to work. So they go around, they start asking us questions. Juror 12, whatever I was, do you know anybody in the courtroom? I said, yes, I do. I said, I took the bar exam with the prosecutor, or with the plaintiff's attorney, and the defense counsel was in my wedding. And I've been an attorney.
Thank you for your interest.
No, that's the great part. I've been an attorney for 25 years, and Your Honor, I've tried cases in front of you, and I'm a solo practitioner, and basically let me go home. I got let me out of here. And I had, not only did they not dismiss me that day, I had to come back the next day, and I didn't get dismissed until lunch the next day. There was no way on God's earth I was going to be on that jury if that judge didn't dismiss anybody until the very end of the selection process.
Oh, wow.
So I had to just sit there and try not to fall asleep and try not to cuss, for listening to all these voir dire questions that did not concern me or my case, knowing I had cases at back of my office that I needed to be working on. It was really frustrating. So you'd like to think that the minute I said that guy was in my wedding, they'd be, Mr. Forshey, take care, we'll see you later.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
The previous time that I was seated, maybe 8 or 10 years, that's what happened.
Yeah.
I told the guy, I said, I've like 8-month-old triplets at home, and the guy was, you're good, leave. Let me leave right then. So
have a nice day.
That was a good excuse back then, yeah. But yeah, different judges do it different ways, so be aware of that.
So listen, again, big thing, chill out on this stuff. Don't get that dogmatic thing. Do your civic duty instead. And even in a case, especially, a use of force case, a self-defense case, you got to ask the question, was this self-defense? Right. Is it up in the air? And I'll tell you the cases that I get involved in, you don't hire an expert witness on cut and dried cases. You just don't.
It doesn't go to trial if it's a cut and dried case.
It doesn't go to trial. Yeah. By the time it gets to trial, it's a mess.
Yep.
It's always a mess. And if I get hired, it's a big, giant, smeared mess. Yep. And wait a minute, let's educate about all this stuff and what goes on here and all those things. So my thing is be the good person that says, no, my job is to look through all this, and not every use of force is a good use of force. Right. And our job is to protect people from unjustified and unlawful use of force against them.
I know you are this way, and I'm this way, and I'll bet a lot of folks watching this are the same way. I am harder on people that misuse guns than somebody who doesn't understand guns. Totally. I have less tolerance for that. And so if you just go into this saying, hey man, the guy had an armed response, and I'm an armed response kind of person, so by God, I'm with him. No, you're showing bias and prejudice and bigotry. Be open-minded, listen to all the facts, and understand that people that live the same lifestyle as you can screw up just as much as somebody who doesn't. So take it seriously, yeah, for sure.
Man, Tim, thanks so much for that.
Absolutely, a pleasure. That was fun.